Yeah, Commissioner Onosorg had let me know he was not going to make it, but I had not heard anything from Commissioner Sandall.
It looks like we are on the air. Are we recording and everything is set to go? All right, thank you. We just had a work session that went right up to 7 o'clock, so we're going to start a couple minutes late here. I'm going to call to order the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of October 18th. It is 7:04 p.m. All right, if you could please note the attendance. Next, we're going to go to the open forum. To participate in the open forum, to address the HRA and items not on the current agenda, you can call in at 612-861-0651. Is there anyone in attendance that wanted to address us for the open forum? All right, Administrative Aide Dubois, is there anyone on the line?
Chair Supple, we do not have any callers at this time.
All right, so we'll just wait a minute and I'll repeat. The number is 612-861-0651. All right, given that no one has called in, we're going to move on to approval of the minutes of the regular HRA meeting of September 20th, 2021.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Regan-Gonzalez and second by Commissioner Vries-Daniels to approve the minutes. Any discussion, corrections, clarifications? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the minutes. Next, we'll move on to approving the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Are there any comments or changes? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? We've approved the agenda. Next, we'll move on to the consent calendar, and I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director Stark. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Supple and Commissioners. The consent calendar contains items which are acted upon by the HRA in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and recommended actions would have also been approved, and no further HRA action would be necessary. Tonight, we only have one item on the consent agenda, and that's the consideration of a resolution authorizing execution of developer agreement with the West Hennepin County Affordable Land Housing Trust, doing business as Homes Within Reach, for the acquisition, rehabilitation, and sale of houses under the New Home Program. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
All right, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Regan-Gonzalez and seconded by Commissioner Vries-Daniels to approve the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? All right, go ahead, Commissioner Regan-Gonzalez.
I just want to make a quick comment that I really do love this program. I think how, looking at how do we make home ownership more affordable, how do we rehab the existing stock that we have, I think this is a great program. So I'm just happy to support it again.
All right, thank you. Any additional comments? I was also happy to see that we're finding a way to productively use the pooled TIF, because I know later in the report it's going to talk about that we have time limits on when we could use it. And I don't know if this was made feasible because of the new legislation or if this would have been one that we could have done already. So go ahead.
Chair Supple and members of the HRA, the way we're doing it right now is we are requiring it to meet the substandard test, so which is what is required by our pooled TIF. With our new special legislation, we are working on a plan to get money transferred to the trust fund so that we don't have to go through that exercise, so that sometimes they find a house that qualifies, sometimes they might not. And so we really are looking forward to the day that we can maybe have some funds to not have to go through that. Right now, under this contract, we do expect it to qualify as substandard because we are using redevelopment pooled TIF.
All right, and again, I think it's a good use of that pooled TIF, so. If there are no other comments, all in favor of approving the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the consent calendar. Next, we're going to move on to consideration of a resolution approving grant agreements with Woodlawn Terrace Cooperative to provide funds for utility upgrades, demolition, and rehabilitation work. Executive Director Stark.
Thank you, Chair Supple. I would ask Housing and Redevelopment Manager Julie Urban to present this staff report.
Thank you, Chair Supple, members of the HRA. The residents of Woodlawn Terrace, a manufactured home community located at 7421 Lindell Avenue, formed the Woodlawn Terrace Cooperative and are in the process of purchasing the property. The park provides affordable homeownership opportunities for low and moderate income households, and self-ownership ensures that the park and its long-term affordability is preserved. City staff have been working with the cooperative on different ways that the city can help support the preservation of the 32 existing affordable homes and facilitate the addition of 21 new homes. In September, the Housing and Redevelopment Authority adopted a resolution committing $350,000 for utility upgrades. The funds are to serve as a match to a Minnesota housing grant that the cooperative has applied for. Staff is also working to identify resources for down payment assistance to new owners. As the cooperative has been working towards closing on the property, they have, however, identified an additional financing gap of $100,000, and they are asking the HRA if they would be willing to contribute additional funds to help them to fill this gap. So there are currently 5 mobile home units on the property that are vacant and abandoned, and the units are in very poor condition and need to be demolished. In addition, there are 2 stick-built structures on the property, one of which is currently being rented, and the second of which has the potential to be rented. Both of these units also require extensive rehabilitation work, and the total estimated cost for all of this work is approximately $60,000. Because both demolition and rehabilitation work on substandard properties are eligible uses for the HRA's Housing and Redevelopment Fund, again, for structures that qualify as substandard, staff is in the process of completing substandard evaluations of the structures. Preliminary inspections completed by the cooperative do indicate and suggest that the structures are very likely to qualify. So what we are proposing is in the grant agreement that's attached, where the HRA would commit up to $60,000 for demolition and rehab work, and that will enable the cooperative to meet the requirements of the financing package and be able to proceed to closing yet this fall. So back at your meeting in September, you also approved $350,000 for a utility upgrade contingent upon approval of a grant agreement. So we have also attached that grant agreement to this motion, asking you to approve both those grant agreements as part of the one action. So the total assistance that the HRA is being asked to provide is $410,000. With that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. And a member from North Country Cooperative Foundation who has been working with the co-op is also here if you have any questions for her.
Do we have any questions? All right, then would someone like to make the motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved to adopt the attached resolution approving a grant agreement with Woodlawn Terrace Cooperative to provide funds for utility upgrades and a grant agreement for demolition and rehabilitation work. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
Will repeat what I said last time. I'm very excited about this project and the work that's going into it. So I support this and hope it all works out in the end for you.
All right, go ahead.
I remember when we had the tour of the site, but I'm missing the details now. So I think that with this agreement and switching over to a cooperative, there was a couple like firsts that had gone on, and I think it was maybe related to the financing for Minnesota Housing, but I don't know if staff can recall what I'm talking about. Was this a first time Minnesota Housing supporting this type of project, or I wish I could remember the details, but I thought that was of note. No, not.
I think, their first mortgage is going to be with Minnesota Housing, and this is the first time that they've gone through that process. Yes, Minnesota Housing has.
Oh, so it was a first for Minnesota
Yes,
housing?
I think that must be the first you're thinking of, yeah.
Okay.
They've often had other financing, but this time it's through Minnesota Housing, and so,
Okay.
I think the other first time, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, is it's the first time that a relationship has been this good between the city and a manufactured home community.
Absolutely. And those two things are very important. I think, Richfield and our staff lead and the community leads in so many areas, especially the HRA. And to see a community be supportive and proactive, I mean, it shouldn't be that unique in it with this community, but unfortunately it is. And so that is very important. But also just, this is an awesome partnership with our residents, with the HRA, with folks at the state, and the city, and our staff have been really great. And we heard that when we went on the tour as well. So I did just want to take some time to lift that up, because I think that's something that Richfield does a lot, is paving the way. And it is one of our top values as a city, but this is another shining example of that. So just wanted to lift that up.
Thank you. And I also want to thank North Country Cooperative Foundation for helping put together the cooperative and helping the residents, because I know they were very appreciative of that. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've passed the motion. Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to consideration of an amendment to the contract for private development with Cedar Point Investments, LLC, extending the contract deadline and allowing for the sale of market rate townhomes. Executive Director Stark.
Thank you. And once again, I would ask Ms. Urban to provide the staff report.
Chair Supple, members of the HRA. So this item is a follow-up to the concept that the HRA considered back in September and indicated support and asked us to bring back actual contract amendment language. So that's what this item is relating to. So as we talked about in September, Cedar Point Investments is constructing 64 townhome units in the Cedar Point 2 housing area. The HRA approved a contract for private redevelopment for the project back in 2018, creating a tax increment financing district that required that 95% of the units be sold to income qualified buyers at either 100% of the area median income or 115%, depending on household size. The HRA assisted the project financially by approving 2 TIF notes in the amount of $900,000 per 32 units constructed affordably, and also by providing a loan of $630,000 for acquisition costs to be repaid through tax increment that would be generated by the project. Construction and sales of the first 32 units are nearing completion. However, cost increases are impacting the affordability of the project. Significant cost increases in materials and labor, along with delays caused by the pandemic and shortages and delays in the supply chains, have raised the sale price of the units to over $400,000, which is out of the range of affordability for the targeted buyers. Given the current unaffordability of the units, the developer is requesting an amendment to the contract that would allow them to construct the remaining 32 units as either affordable or market rate. So in order to allow the project to proceed, the contract would be amended as follows. The developer would be able to sell the remaining 32 units as either market rate or affordable. The decision regarding affordability would be made by groups or pods of 8 units. At the conclusion of construction, any pods of 8 sold as market rate would be removed from the TIF district. If all 32 units are removed from the TIF district, the second of the 2 TIF notes would not be issued. If any of the 32 units are sold affordably, the TIF note would be sized accordingly. For example, if 8 units are affordable, then the TIF note would be $225,000. If units are removed from the TIF district, less increment will be generated to repay the HRA loan. Therefore, at the sale of each unit, the developer would place $8,506 into an escrow account. At the conclusion of construction, the city's financial consultants would prepare an estimate of projected tax increment and determine the final amount to be paid to the HRA from the escrowed funds. The final construction date would also be extended from December 31st, 2022 to December 31st, 2024. And I think as we talked about last time, the hope is certainly to have it finished sooner than that, but wanting to, in the event of more pandemic or, all the things that have been happening the last couple of years, they wanted to have that a built-in extra time. And I would note that the recommended motion is asking you to grant the HRA attorney to approve the final form of the amendment. We were still trying to explain some of the issue with whether it could go affordable or market rate was proving a little bit confusing, and so there may be some language adjustments just to make sure that both sides understand and are clear with what we're planning to do. But the concept is, we're in agreement on the concept, and it will be essentially in the form that you are looking at. So if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Are there additional questions? All right, would someone like to make the motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved to approve a resolution amending the contract for private development with Cedar Point Investment LLC and granting the HRA attorney approval of the final form of the amended document. Any discussion, questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, we've passed the amendment to the contract for private development. Next, we're going to move on to the consideration of the acceptance of the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority Tax Increment Financing District status update. Executive Director Stark.
Thank you, Chair Supple. This annual process is coordinated by Community Development Accountant Mert Link, so I'd ask her to present the staff report. Thank you.
Chair Supple and members of the HRA. The Tax Increment Financing District Status Update is presented to the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority annually for review. There are currently 13 active TIF districts. This year, the TIF status update shows that the HRA is able to meet all of its pay-as-you-go note and general obligation tax increment bonds. With that, I'm going to ask that Rebecca Kurtz from Ellers give us a presentation on the TIF update.
Thank you.
Rebecca?
Thank you. Again, Rebecca Kurtz with Ellers. Happy to be here this evening. And as preface, the news is good news. You have 13 active tax increment financing districts, and as an HRA, you will be able to meet all of the obligations. So that's kind of the summary and the good news for the evening. I do want to take a little time, though, and just go through a reminder for maybe you as the HRA, but also if people are watching from the public, on what the status of some of the specific TIF districts are, what your obligations are, and then answer any questions that you may have. As we mentioned, there are 13 active tax increment districts. Just as a reminder of where we have been, at the end of 2019, there were 2 TIF districts that were decertified and able to come back on the roll for calendar year 2020 with the HRA, or the city, county and school district, all receiving the full benefit of that increase in tax base that resulted from the assistance initially with the tax increment. With the 13 districts that you do have right now, there were 3 that were added in 2020, and we'll talk about those in a little bit here. All of the cities and HRA's tax increment districts are located within the redevelopment project area. As a reminder, one of the requirements of a TIF district is that they be located in a project area. The tax increment district is where the development and that increase in tax base is taking place on the specific parcels. The larger redevelopment project area is where a portion of that tax increment could be spent if you chose to do so. So as you talked about the pooling with tax increment earlier, the boundaries for that expenditure of pooling are set by the project area. They are those boundaries are coterminous with the city boundaries, so it makes it easy and gives you that ultimate flexibility of spending those pooling dollars anywhere within the city limits. The HRA does have 3 types of obligations. Most common is the pay-as-you-go note, and just as a reminder, that is an obligation where the developer pays for all of the costs upfront, finances a project, builds it to the extent that the contract and agreement is met, the project is completed, then the HRA issues a note and the developer is reimbursed through the tax increment over the duration of the TIF district. The second type of obligation is a general obligation tax increment bond. There are 2 TIF bonds that the city issued, so outstanding obligations for the city and the HRA. With that, we do not see it as frequently because in those situations, the city issued debt, paid for some costs up front, and then the TIF is being used to repay the debt service on those bonds. I'll talk about the specifics in a little bit here, but those 2 general obligation bonds are tied to the Best Buy project and the interchange when that development occurred, and then also the Lindale Gateway West project. And the final type of obligation is an interfund loan, and most of your TIF districts do have an interfund loan associated with that. For the most part, those interfund loans are connected with making sure that the HRA is able to fully recoup all costs that are incurred. So it may be for the administration and some of those upfront costs that that are incurred when the district is being set up, then the TIF can repay those. In addition, there are a couple interfund loans that are related to projects where the HRA had land and gave the land to the project, and then the tax increment is being used to reimburse the HRA for those land costs. All of your TIF districts do have the ability to retain up to 10% of the tax increment for administration of that district. As you may recall, there are reports that are done and ongoing administration of the agreements and TIF district through those terms. And so we are maximizing that 10% for administration on all of the districts that the HRA has. In addition, some of your redevelopment districts are set up to allow for 25% for pooling. And as initially discussed earlier this evening, that is when some of the funds are being used for other projects outside of the TIF district, but within the city limits. And that 25% is a maximum. It does include the 10% for admin. So it really is about 15% that can be used on other projects in the community. This was alluded to that, as you guys recall, you did receive special legislation earlier this year. And then along with the special legislation that the city and HRA specifically received, there was some temporary legislation due to the pandemic and situation that communities are facing that is allowing some additional flexibility on how tax increment is being used. And as mentioned, we are working with staff and completing an analysis. We are not quite finalized yet, but we're very close, that is going to discuss some of those opportunities and also verify or confirm what is available today and what we are projecting could be available for those additional uses, not only through the special legislation that you were successful at receiving for the city and HRA, but then also that temporary legislation that is available for all communities. So stay tuned. We will have some specifics on that in the very near future. As we look at the specific TIF districts, I'm not going to go through every one of your TIF districts, but I am happy to answer any questions if there are items that I don't cover in the initial presentation, but I want to highlight a few items here. First of all, I want to call to attention that the Urban Village and the Interchange West Lindale Gateway TIF district are going to be decertified at the end of 2025. And while I recognize that still is a few years off, we are starting to think about what that means for the community, having some discussions, and based on where values are today for 2021, that would add almost $2 million to the city's tax capacity. So it is quite a significant addition that will come online for the city in 2026. I think it is a discussion that we continue to have, but I will say it creates some opportunities with that increase in tax base, whether it be the ability for the council to maybe reduce or maintain a tax rate. Maybe there are larger projects coming online or needing to be done that we can tie additional debt with when that decertification comes online, again, to minimize what that impact is going to be for the community. But I think with $2 million increase in tax capacity, and again, we'll see what happens in the next 4 years here, it's definitely a success story for what the community has done and what those TIF districts were able to do with that development. As I mentioned, the Interchange West TIF district, that is where the Best Buy campus is, and that is one of the projects that did have a general obligation TIF bond outstanding on that. I call that to attention just to confirm again that projections are that that TIF bond can be paid without any additional support. There will be sufficient revenue to not only pay that debt service, but also continue to make the payments on the pay-as-you-go note. As I look to the Lindale Gateway West TIF district, that is the second TIF district that has an outstanding general obligation tax increment bond. This, for those of you who have been listening to me provide this update for several years, are familiar that we have been watching this district, especially with the way it relates with that TIF bond. I am very happy to say we are at the point where the increment is coming in to fully pay the debt service on that general obligation bond. So we were not needing to levy taxes to make any shortfall, which many years ago was a concern. So we have been able to make all of those debt service payments without any additional support other than just the tax increment. In addition, there was an interfund loan in the amount of $1.1 million that was also provided for this project. And again, you may recall that there were times where my news on having that paid was not always very favorable. I am very happy to report that projections are continuing to be even more favorable on how that is going to be paid. Based on current projections, we will be able to fully pay the principal on that, so the $1.1 million. Projections still do not show that all of the interest can be paid in full. However, we are continuing to see heading in the right track where more and more interest will be paid. So we anticipate that a large portion of that interest can be paid in full. As you know, ultimately, that future ability to pay the interest and how much of that interest is paid will depend on where we go with future market values and the tax increment that is generated. But this has been a district that we've been watching and did not always have such a favorable outcome, and we are moving in the right direction. On the final note I will make on this district is that when this district was established back in, my apologies for not having it on the top of my head, December of 2002, and when these decisions were made to issue the bonds and to do a large interfund loan, the council and the HRA at that time were looking to address some serious concerns they had in the community. And it was not always projected that that interfund loan would be paid off in full. So I think that the fact that we are getting close and able to pay all of the principal is a positive for that. As we jump forward, I want to call to your attention on the Lindale Gardens TIF district. It is one of our newer TIF districts where the former Lindale Gardens site was redeveloped into several different types of housing, and along with the Lake Winds Food Co-op. There also are discussions where there will possibly be a brewery and a restaurant on that site. We are early in the district and have only made a couple tax increment payments. However, the market values have come in significantly higher than where they were projected. And so it is early to give an estimate of how long that district will be or what the term is. But I do want to say the increment has been coming in higher than projected, so it is performing very, very well and been a success. Then jumping forward to the 2018-1 TIF district, or the townhome development that was discussed just prior, along with the 3 new TIF districts that were established in 2020. Those are districts that are under construction or relatively new, nearing construction. So those 4 districts have not started to generate increment, but we will look to see those having their first increment generated in the next year or 2 for each of those. I also will note that based on the action that you took just before this, the summary and the obligations and description for the 2018 TIF district will be amended when you see this next time to reflect the amendment to the development agreement, and then also what ultimately happens with those additional 32 townhomes and how that will impact any future obligations and the amount of those obligations. Also included in the packet that you received is just a summary again of the districts that have been decertified since the city started using tax increment back in the mid-'80s. There's a map that outlines the location of each of the 13 active TIF districts, and then a high-level overview of how tax increment works. And I will say, do recognize it's very high. We do a seminar, and I can talk about tax increment for a day and a half if you want to get into the details, but I'll spare you tonight on that. But again, overall message is that your districts are in great shape, your obligations are going to be met, and with where we're seeing market values and the increment that is coming in as a result of those, districts are performing well, and I think or hope that we have some opportunities to maybe get some of these projects on the tax roll at full value a little sooner than what is projected or what the statutory maximum is. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that detailed report. Are there any questions for Ms. Kurtz? All right, Commissioner Breeze Daniels.
Just a comment more than a question. As you said, TIF is very detailed, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions in the general public, and I always really appreciate the information you put in here, and I direct people to your yearly update often, so thank you for continuing to add that in there.
Yes, thank you for, it's always really clear when you explain it in the graphs and things like that. I also want to extend thank you to Community Development Accountant Mert Link, because I know that this is a very complex thing and you do us well, so thank you very much for all your work. Any additional comments or questions? Executive Director Stark?
Yes, Chair Seppel, I would just like to add that Ms. Kurtz has been providing us with her kind of analytic services. I'm trying to remember, 2000, is that when?
It's 21 years.
So this entire millennium, Ms. Kurtz has been providing us with these TIF services, and we are very fortunate to have her services and have that kind of consistency and longevity that many of these districts, in particular the Interchange West and the Lindale Gateway West, are very, very complex, and Ms. Kurtz has the history and kind of the institutional knowledge, and it's just wonderful to have her as part of the team.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, with that, would someone like to move to accept the report?
I'll make the motion to move the report.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to accept the Richfield HRA Annual Tax Increment Financing District Status Update. Any further questions or discussions? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on, we have HRA discussion items. Are there any items that anyone would like to bring up? All right, then we'll move on to the executive director's report. Mr. Stark.
So at last month's meeting, we accepted a donation agreement with the estate of Jerry Mathwig from Metro Sales. I just wanted to pass along that last weekend, Mr. Mathwig passed away, and we as staff, as I had said last month, had worked very hard to create and nurture a relationship with Mr. Mathwig and his staff. And so if we would certainly like to offer his family and friends condolences.
Thank you, and please pass along the HRA members' condolences as well.
I will. That's my only comment tonight.
All right, thank you. Claims?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Vrees Daniels and seconded by Commissioner Regan Gonzalez to approve the claims. Any questions? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the claims. Seeing that we have no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.